Stacy, it is so good to see you. For those of you who have never met Stacy, when did I meet you, Stacy? I met Stacy early in my journey. I think Olivia made an introduction to us.
Well,
And ever since then, whether you mean to be or know you are, you have been a mentor. You're one of those people who, when I'm feeling down or when I need a word of wisdom or support, or even sometimes just a kick in the pants, which you have done that too, you're always there for me. So while we don't talk on a daily basis, I feel you in my it sounds so dramatic. I feel you in my life
I feel the same, Stace.
in a really, yeah, in a really real way. So when thinking about wanting to use this hour to hopefully provide inspiration and help people in this uncertain time, you were the first person I thought of. And I thought, regardless, if nothing else, we can reconnect and catch up, because it's been a minute since I've seen you.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so happy to be here. And, I feel like you took the words right out of my mouth about you. So we're on the same page. I know we always joke about our names being the same, but I think we have a spirit that's the same
Yeah,
too.
a kindred spirit. Yeah, I always joke. I'm sure people who are on here already know this. I think it's funny how my maiden name is Stacy Taubman and your
Yep.
maiden name is Stacy Tasman,
And
and
then our two names,
Stacy Since and
Stahl. Yes, one syllable.
yeah, so it's one of those things. But either way, thank you for taking the time. And like I said, in these uncertain times, I think what keeps me going is talking to women like yourself, right? People who have done really interesting things, who have some experience, who can share those words of wisdom, and who are willing to be really real, right? And say, like, I don't have all the answers, because I think it's those moments that keep me going. And I know that there's a lot of people in the city and people who are watching who know you, but I'm going to also make sure that we dive in a way that people who don't know you still get to feel like they get to know you. And one of the ways here at Rise, we like to start interviews, and the way we're starting on our media platform is I have massive ADD and don't love reading bios, nor do I love sitting through bios. So a much more fun way to start conversations, I feel like, is what was your first job and what is your current job?
Sure, that's a great question. Well, my first ever job was so there's backstory, but I packed goodie bags for a roller skating rink when I was
Awesome.
10. But the story is my parents growing up owned a roller skating rink.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, in Florida. And so every weekend there were hundreds of kids coming for birthday parties. And so as part of the package for the kids, they'd walk home with a goodie bag. And so I honestly managed a team of other 10-year-olds to create this assembly line and pack the goodie bags. And we tried 1,000 different ways. Like, okay, should we set up an assembly line and each have our own bag and pack it, or should I do one and pass it? We tried 1,000 things, and we got paid 10 cents a goodie bag. So you're making 600 goodie bags in 3 hours, and you're 10.
That's quite a bit of money at 10.
Yeah, it worked. How much is that? Yeah, it was enough. It was enough.
Well, that explains why you were able to get started at such an early age. If you're already managing people at 10, that's incredible.
That was a big opportunity in my youth growing up. My parents had that business and a handful of others, and so I never had household chores. I had job chores.
Interesting. Yeah, and I never knew that about you. That's part of the reason why I love that question so much, is because so often we don't talk about those crazy jobs we had when we were kids, and it shaped us in many ways.
Totally.
And then currently, my friend, what are you doing?
Currently, I am the owner of a company called Sweeter Cards. So we are the first ever greeting card and chocolate bar in one. I should have pulled a product out. I will at the end. But it honestly is a greeting card. It opens like a greeting card you write inside, but the back has chocolate inside. And so, we're more than just a card, but, not full on flowers, easily sendable in the mail. So my goal with that is just to be the only chocolate bar in the greeting card aisle and every greeting card aisle in the country. So that's where, I'm running that now.
I love that. And you can't go wrong with chocolate. Who doesn't like chocolate?
I don't know one soul.
That's awesome. Well, and that company itself is pretty impressive and doing great things. And I definitely want to dive into that. But I remember when we first met, I was so blown away that you had sold your first company at a very young age.
Yeah.
Yeah. So take us through what your first company was and all that fun stuff.
Sure. So my first company was a website. It was called, or it is called, well, it's now called How They Asked. When I started, it was How He Asked. But you know, proposals widen to men asking women, women asking men, women asking women. So they changed the pronoun to they. But it is a marriage proposal website. We are a platform. Oh, someone.
I don't know. Yeah, I think we're okay. I don't know what the noise was. Sorry. Technical difficulties. Keep going.
So we were a way for couples to share their marriage proposal stories. So we were a platform for anyone to go on and upload their photos and their videos and the written story, because when you get engaged, everyone wants to know the story of how he or she asked.
Yeah.
And so we built this major Instagram following, social media following, because it turned out that a lot of people wanted to read strangers' proposal stories, which, in our rom-com world, that makes total sense.
And how old, I'm going to pause you for a minute. How old were you when you started all that?
I was 23.
So fresh out of college, you graduated.
Yep. I graduated. I had like a job and a half.
What does that mean?
Well, I got laid off of my very first like real big girl job, which was definitely an interesting emotional experience. Now I think it's like it's known to all that I am a go-getter and stop at nothing. But when I was 22, I hadn't proven myself yet. And so I knew I wanted to stop at nothing, but my employer didn't.
So that had to be a little crushing at that time.
Yeah, it was. I mean, to be fair, they laid off, a round of people, and I was one of them. So I don't take it way personally, but, it still lit this fire in me. I remember I actually stayed in touch a little bit with some of the former employees and even the CEO. And I, 5 or 6 years later, when I was selling my company, I reached out to him, maybe as a look at me now, but also
couched with a beautiful,
yeah.
carefully worded, how are you doing?
He was proud of me. He was, it was more of just a like, wow, the world is real situation. I went into my career thinking that, if you were unstoppable, you were unstoppable. And that's just not the case. And obviously we're going through that right now. Right. So it did teach me a good lesson in the beginning. And then I had another job that I loved. And that company did great. So I call the first one my half job. And the second one actually was, it was total women leadership. The CEO, CFO, everyone in charge was a woman. Most of the senior leaders in general are all women. So that gave me a lot of, re-confidence after I'd been fired by a bunch of men.
So it picked you back up and you started to create this website about at the time how he asked, now how they ask.
Yeah. And I was, I was very open when I started with the company that I was at. I still keep in touch with the CEO. I have a call with her, next week. So she was a big mentor for me as I started the business. And it just got to a certain point that I said, okay, I think this is something. And luckily, I could just sort of make the transition financially to be able to support myself. And I was 23, so it really wasn't like I had built this big, career and this huge salary to come along. So the opportunity cost was quite low, which is something that, I always say is a huge advantage for me personally, and continues to be, that I was able to start something so young, because that helped build up the resistance to risk for me.
Yeah. Absolutely. At that point, you didn't have a lot to lose.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a great book called Antifragile by Nassim. I'm not going to get his last name, but it's a great book that sort of talks about that. At that point, you were anti-fragile.
Yeah, totally.
And so it's a little easier. Easier is the wrong word. It underscores how much work and how hard you got after things. But I do think that it's interesting to think about that in terms of, and I can't wait to talk about it versus the second time around.
Yeah.
When you had a little bit more to lose, so to speak. Yeah. And so you get this company off the ground. And I love your story about when you started. One of the things that inspires me about you is that you are such a I'm a go-getter, but on this like sort of secret, I don't know. You talk to me sometimes about owning my success a little bit more. I don't own things the way you do. And so when I talk to you, I love how openly a go-getter you are. And so I love that Jim Carey story. So if you don't mind sharing that.
Yeah. Well, I had this moment when I first started my website, and then I later learned that Jim Carrey had a similar one. So I'll start with his. Before he ever even got a single acting role, he wrote himself, I think it was a $10 million check that he would eventually cash. And so he set his sights obviously so high before even one successful part. And so I vividly remember this, and this at this point is, 10 years ago. But when I was buying the domain name, how he asked before I even started building the business, I said to myself, the Knot is totally going to buy this one day. And
did you really in that moment like feel it? Because like there's times I say stuff, but it's like I'm just saying it, right? I don't know if I really believe it or feel it. So I'm curious, in that moment, did you really feel it?
That's a good point, because I'm not sure that matters, and that's
a
the
good point
beauty of just putting the vision out there.
Mm-hmm.
Would I have been disappointed in the end if the Knot did not buy it? No, because if that drove me to start the business, what came out of that dream, whether it was a reality or not, was still enough, was way more than enough. It was very significant. So I looked at that as a driving force.
Yeah.
It came to fruition, so great. But but I call it my Jim Carrey moment. And even when I first introduced this recent business, I said, yeah, I want to be the only chocolate bar in the greeting card aisle in every single greeting card aisle in the country. And that's not as much of a Jim Carrey moment, but it is sort of my one liner to prove to me that I will bring this far, or that it has this big potential. And I'll see, I'm still working through this business. It's a very different one than before. But again, your question of, what if you don't know? Who cares? Something else will come and it'll be just as great.
Oh, I love that. Because, early on I was like, we're going to open these all over, and on a good open rice collaboratives all over. And on a good day, we're going to go global. And there's times where I really believe it. And then there's times where I feel silly saying it out loud.
Yeah.
Especially given these current circumstances. So I love hearing that from you and just kind of where you were at and what it did for you. So you started this company at 22, 23.
Yep.
And give us just a short, I don't want to play by play for 5 years, but I'm curious, can I give us a little bit of a short recap of those 5 years to get to the point of the Not buying you, or actually the company XO who owns the Not buying you?
Yeah. And actually now XO Group got acquired by another company. So it's, who cares about the name, but it's taken a lot of different paths. Yeah. So, in the beginning, I realized that one of the most time consuming parts of the content business was just getting the content on the site and looking good and presentable for essentially our customers, who are the people sharing their stories. So one of the biggest, most impactful things that still is the exact same functionality that it was when I first launched it was this self-submission platform. So instead of people emailing us their stories and their videos where we had to have an editor, make it all gorgeous on the site for them, we just created a user-generated platform where their submission essentially turns into the post itself. And so that was my first investment in the company. And that really helped us, you hear this word scale, but that helped us to be able to publish 5 stories, go from 5 stories a week to 70 stories a week. Sure. And hundreds every month and thousands over time. And, I'm sure it's close to 50,000 at this point. So that was one of the first big investments in the idea, obviously financially, but also just in the idea.
Right.
And that led this great foundation to just continue figuring out ways to get all of this content to also make sense to, as I told you, other people who don't know the couples. And so social media was just in its prime at the time. And so we started sharing some of the, editorial pics on our social, Instagram especially. And, we grew to 500,000 very quickly.
Yeah.
500,000 followers. And so I would say that just to the quick summary is those two things really catapulted us into this, in the wedding world, a universally known platform property. And so with the knot, you know, we had worked together in different capacities, being non-competitive, but also in the same industry. You know, they focus on the wedding, but they also have other properties like the knot, the nest, which is home building, and then the bump, which is preparing for baby.
Yeah.
And they didn't have anything before that. And so how he asked being all about the proposal was just a natural fit. So, you know, we just had partnerships over the years, whether they're content or advertising or just fun video campaigns. And it just made sense one day. They were like, all right, let's just join up. And I was like, I can't do a Jim Carrey impersonation, but I was like, hell yeah. So, you know, it all came true, and it was a really, yeah, it was an awesome thing.
Yeah, and I think two things you brought up are really helpful. That you know, content is one of the hardest things I think for so many of us, right? It takes so much work. So I think that was brilliant that you created a way for that to be created without you're getting out there and doing it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was just, you know, it ended up being one of the more expensive things that I was spending, you know, on editors it was time.
Sure.
And, you know, it was pretty quick math to realize that after 6 months, and knowing how much traffic would be generated from the additional stories that the self-submission platform could provide, it was a no-brainer. I think the ROI, it was like a month that it actually ended up turning around for us. So
Yeah, and then the power of social media. I mean, yes, back then it was newer, but it still is quite a impressive tool. The hard part now is cutting through the noise.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so the knot bought you,
Yeah,
and you're 28. I mean,
I was. Yeah.
what does that even feel like? So many of us work so long, and you know that's not something that usually happens at a young age like that. That had to have felt a little daunting in some ways to be like, okay, and now I'm 28. Now what? What was
Yeah.
that like for you?
It did. I felt quite young. I did, and but you know, over time, you put so much into every day, and you build so much gratitude for what you have been building that the top just sort of feels like, well, of course I'm here. I just lived through all of that up and down and wild sort of um journey. And so I think being at the top itself, and I've shared this story before, I know it's one you like, but you know, I was on a hike with my friend shortly after, and um it was like kind of a long, hard hike. And so for like 6 hours, we're hiking up and down and up and down. And, you know, I had a lot of change in my life. She had a lot of change in her life. And it was just a best friend trip, she and I. And we just talked about so many things and learned things about each other and ourselves and challenged each other. And I just felt like, wow, this was such a special day. And we get to the top. And of course, after like panting and being so tired, we're like, hell yeah, look at this view. It's amazing. And we were up there for like 2 minutes, maybe less. We just looked around, took some pictures, and then we're like, hey, let's go back down. And so when I looked at the entire day, our, you know, 9-hour round trip journey, we literally spent 2 minutes at the top. The rest was either going up or going down. And so I kind of liken that to the experience. Like, I didn't stay at the top feeling like, you know, woohoo, this is the life for too long, because, you know, that is not, each day of your life is your life, not one thing that happens one time. And of course there were, you know, amazing opportunities and things I could provide for my family, my husband and my dog, not a big deal, because of it. But again, you know, I was very eager to start another business because I just remembered that it's about the climb and it's about the journey, and then it's about how I spend my time every day and not just what it feels like at the top.
And I remember so you were our keynote speaker at our conference this past summer. And I remember I was in the thick of things and getting Rise Denver open. And I was just suffering with exhaustion and fear and all these different emotions. And, you know, of course, the cliche of it's the journey, not the destination. You know, I've heard that 1,000 times. But that analogy really, for whatever reason, helped me to really wrap my head around it. That it's, you know, where am I trying to head, and am I enjoying it? If I'm miserable every day and just focusing on my exhaustion and how hard and how scared I am, afraid I am, this is not going to be very fun when I get to the top and look around for those 2 minutes.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing. The the top is so short-lived. And so I think the point is not so much to think like there's gonna be nothing at the top,
Sure.
but there will be. But the reason the top matters is because you spent so much of your time doing the work. So you could not get to the top without the work. So when you're at the top, you think about the work. You don't, you don't think all that work disappeared. It didn't. And so, we talk sometimes, I know you asked me, like, did my definition of success ever change? And so in that way it did, because I used to really, really believe that until I got to the top, I hadn't made it. And when you get there, you realize that I was making it as I was making it, right? Like,
right. No, that makes total sense.
quite literal. So yeah, now I don't know. I mean, I sit at the top a little more now when I get to a hike. Now that I made that analogy, I'm like, no, let's actually sit here. But it's not more than like 10 minutes now,
Sure. No, I think that was so helpful for me because, I remember the first time I ever achieved something, so to speak. It was a wash shoot competition, a business competition, and I won the $25,000 grant, which was a really big deal.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling like I was thinking I should feel a certain way, like that jubilant, like, woo, check me out. And I felt so unbelievably flat.
Yeah.
Even to the point of the next day, I almost was low. And now I have a term for it. I call it big moment hangover.
Totally. That's such a good word.
Right? But no one talks about it. You think you're going to feel a certain level of emotion or joy. And we're not talking about the fact that for some of us, when you hit that moment, it actually does zero for you.
Yeah. I think most it would do zero. I definitely think, wins really help get through the tough times, the losses, right? Like what I always say to myself is like, the pattern to go here, and this could just be a goal that you have for yourself, like clean up your closet, okay? But the pattern to get there will always be up and down. So as long as it's going up and down, always up, like I'm okay with that. You can't think it's just going to be a straight path up.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you reach the goal, you just get this practice that, hey, I survived, I'll make it. So now every new goal that you have, you understand it's an up and down to the top. And so, I definitely, I appreciate the wins for sure. But I just think that like every day I am me. I wake up like with the same screwed up hair and, you know, and none of like having had a success the day before really doesn't change that.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that in a positive way, because if you also had a bad day the day before, you still wake up, maybe a little bags under your eyes, but you will always be you, and you will always have a new day to try to make the best of. And so thinking that the best is only at the end or at the top is just, to me, doing a little bit of a disservice to the beauty that you have in each day.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely great. And you already answered the question of how success has changed. So yay.
Yeah.
Well, the other success question, I'm curious, and I'm sure people sort of already have a sense of it because a lot of the way you talk sort of alludes to it, but I'm curious what you think is one of the reasons that you've been able to be so successful. And again, I mean, now that I know that you started working and been managing people at 10, it's kind of like a dumb question for me to ask. It's like, duh.
I've had this for like 22 years, so
right?
I'm not playing chicken.
No, but I don't know if there's any traits or any things that you look back and you're like, okay, this is really why I was able to cut it when so many other people aren't able to cut it, right? Like I'm sure you're not the first or the last that had this great idea for a website and or even self-creating content, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of people doing those things, but yours stood out beyond many others. So, what do you think your secret to success was?
It's a really good question, and I think about it often because I do, people will always question themselves. I know you and I have had this conversation of, everyone has this fraud conversation. And so, I look at it like it's part, there will always be parts luck. But if you turn that into, so like the luck for me was just that no one had done a proposal site before, but proposals and sharing your experiences with an audience, even if you're just a regular person, that was becoming more popular with social media. So it was a timing thing. But what I don't want to do is discredit the work that I put into it and the traits that I do have. So on one hand, I do believe that a lot of business is fortuitous. It can, all of that potential could be there, but if you don't grab it, it's not there. And so that is, I think, one of my biggest traits is that, you know, I just do it. I just, if I see something, if I feel something, if I get excited about something, there is a reason. And I think a lot of people get scared by that rumbling excitement. And I'm like, even now, I think like I'm like out of breath because I'm like, it's so fun, you know? And like, so anytime you get this bubble of excitement, like I could do that, or like this might work, I just always cash in on that. And I never look the other direction and I never doubt myself. Now,
well, I'm going to pause you on that because I hear you say that. I know that's true because you and I have had so many conversations. I, on the other hand, am filled with doubt on a daily basis, if we're being honest. I mean, that's a little bit of a dramatic exaggeration, but I talk to people like you and I believe you when you say that.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, is that something that you think you just are hardwired that way? Is that practice? Where does that come from for those people that are listening who are like myself that are like, yeah, that's not how I'm wired, or
yeah,
I don't feel that way.
I
get a little bit of you.
I don't know. I think so. I do think that there's a bit of this like natural intuition, but I will say, you know, I think a lot of people start saying this as if, well, I'll just come out with it. I had very supportive parents, and you know, I had this incredibly emotionally intelligent mom who, my parents always ran businesses, and my dad would do one part of the business, my mom another. Sometimes they'd switch, you know, but my mom was always super emotionally intelligent and really great with any people part of the business. And then my dad was very, you know, got on his hands and knees, did some of the crazy work, and just cut through everything.
Yeah.
So I had that example of seeing two people do that. And then not only that, if I had an idea for one of their businesses or, you know, something at school, they always said yes to me, always. So I have just always heard yes, or go for it, girl, you know. Also, they worked a lot and weren't like traditional parents, so a lot of times I would just be like, okay, bye, I'm gonna go try to do this fundraiser, and like, you know, they didn't even care. So I do think that part of that was from my upbringing. But that being said, you know, I'm not with my parents every day anymore. They don't, you know, I don't call them for validation. So I do think that people have an opportunity to start saying yes to themselves more as well. And so my point in saying that is some of it's natural, and then some of it is our voices. And now in our lives, what I would just say is you be your own voice. You start to be that voice that I had when I was 12 and 17 and 20. You know, you start to say to yourself, I can do that. Or I think I've told you this before, but like I talk to myself in the mirror. You know,
I didn't know that. I love that.
I'm flat out. Like sometimes if I'm low, I'll like go to the mirror. I'll be like, "Stop that! Like you got this," you know. And like I will be like, "What are you doing? Like you are capable. You're strong. Like look at your eyelashes." Like I will go to town. And I'm not like that to like my friends. You know, I feel very like, you know, the silly girl on the block. But you know, you have to do positive self-talk. You don't always have to feel positive. I am not saying I always feel that, but I do believe that you have to just keep that dialogue going for yourself.
And it sounds like it's a muscle you've developed. And that reminds me of your keynote this summer. You were talking about getting things done. And I don't mean to put you on the spot because you may not remember exactly what you said, but many of our members have brought that back up. Do you remember what you said, or you want me to kind of prompt you some more about?
Well, I think that, you know, there's this impulse feeling. Is this what you're referring to?
I think so. And attacking it.
Yeah. So, well, one thing that I noticed about my habits is that, you know, I'd have this big long to-do list, and let's say I had 8 things on it and I made a new one every single day. I realized at some point, like I had these like 3 that just like kept coming back to the top over and over, and it really stressed me out. I mean, it was just a weight that was always on me, and I just stared at them one day and I was like, what is it about you that I like can't get you off my plate. And what I realized is like, I'm scared of that thing. And, but also, well, that was the most important thing. Like one of them literally was like, EXO group, the Knot, like asked for my financials so they could make an offer. And I was like, ooh, not gonna deal with that. But like, what? That is the most important thing in the world. But I kept putting it off for days and days. And so I guess what I realized when I made the sort of math on the stuff that scares me is also the most important, it's kind of a no-brainer to then say to yourself, well then, like I have to do it first. So if I start to feel like I'm afraid of something, now I'm like, well, that's at the top of the to-do list. And so
say that to yourself in the mirror.
yeah, I just walk around, talk to myself, talk to my dog about it, talk to the mirror about it, anyone who wants to listen. So yeah, that realization, just that we put off things that we fear and we fear the things that are most important. You know, you sort of have to say to yourself, do I really want to not do things that are not important? No one will say no. No one is going to be like, yeah, no, I don't want to do the important things. And especially if anyone listening, I mean, clearly you're the type of person who wants to invest in themselves. So your answer should and will always, I'm sure, be, I want to do the important things. And so the other part of that is when I realized, like, okay, I'm scared of these things. Do I let them build the fear or do I just do it? Do I just, I like the whole Ellen DeGeneres thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you quickly catch people up for
yeah.
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 Spoiler alert, Stacy was on the Ellen DeGeneres show.
It was very fun. It feels so distant. But yeah, so so what happens? There's a cashier at Walgreens that is just so friendly, like turns everyone's day around. He'll just try to make you feel so special. And there's like 20 people in line and he'll still spend time asking you how you are. And so around Christmas one year, I just said, I'm going to leave a gift card on his car, just make him feel good and say, it was going to be anonymous from the universe and everyone in it that he, makes feel good. And then I told it to a couple friends and they were like, I love Mike. I know Mike too. And of course they knew Mike. If I knew him and loved him, they would too. So it kind of just built in my head, like, wait, if everyone wants to contribute, like, why don't I do one of those like GoFundMe pages? And so instead of doubting anything or thinking, no, maybe not, maybe I'll test this first, maybe, I just did it. And I happened to be going on a plane. And so I just like created a Word doc and I had 2 hours of no Wi-Fi and I just like, created a profile and put my, who is this guy? What are we doing? How are we raising the money? And then when I got off the plane, got the Wi-Fi, uploaded it. And like within an hour, we raised like $7,000 for this guy. I was like, holy shit. So that was one thing where it was like, again, you can go back and forth 1,000 times, or you can spend an hour and a half just creating the profile, the page and seeing how it goes. You don't have to sit here and wonder how it will go if you just do it. And so then the news here kind of got a hold of it. And I was on the phone with one of the producers and I just, in my mind, I was like, I should ask if they know Ellen. And of course, like you'd be like, second guess yourself, that's dumb, you shouldn't. Or like, nah, maybe let me wait and see. Like, no, again, I just said, do you know Ellen, by the way? And they were like, DeGeneres? And I was like, yeah. And like, well, we don't know her personally, but she is in our network. So they air on the same TV channel. And I was like, okay, well, could you maybe like find a little bucket to put it in of hers? They said fine. And literally that day I got a call from the Ellen DeGeneres show and they were like, yeah, we want you on. So, or we want to surprise Mike. So point being, these instances where you think, no way, that's crazy, or that's impossible, or like, no, but maybe I could do it another way. Just don't think it. All of those things took an hour. They didn't take, it didn't take 7 hours, it didn't take 40 days, it didn't take years. It took just this like impulse and it coming out of my mouth. Like that was it. And
I'm sure the counter to that is like, yeah, but that doesn't always happen. And I'm sure you had many of hours that you did things that didn't come to fruition. But those ones that do hit,
Yeah. And I guess like I subscribe to like saying yes to everything. So my husband and I call it defaulting to yes.
Mm.
So many of our friends default to no, and they have families, so it's a little different. But you'll say like, hey, do you want to do park on Saturday? And immediately it's like, well, we have this plan and that plan and this and maybe, and it's essentially defaulting to no. And I think I would think, oh, that sounds great, I'd love to. And then secretly behind, I would rearrange what I had. And
Mhm.
so I just consider myself a yes person. And so anything that goes the other direction, it doesn't have to bring me down, because I will say yes to something else another day and that will turn into some positive occurrence and we'll be fine.
I love that about you. And you're so growth focused, which I think helps with that, which leads me to my next question, right?
Okay.
So you've had success, you sold your company, the pinnacle of starting a company, and you're 28, and fast forward, I know it took you a couple years to think through what's next for your life.
Yep.
And you start a second company. And I love, when I've talked to you about it, how you made a really conscious choice about what kind of company you wanted to start. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, great segue. Thank you.
I'll keep us on track. I can keep us on track.
Yeah, doing great. So, so I'd done the whole internet and social media based business, and I would say I was slightly burnt out on it, but also just wanted to learn something new. And I think, I don't think that I would have felt. Oh, what happened here?
Yeah, I'll fix it.
Okay.
Yeah. So a camera got turned on. Hold on. I think okay, you're back. You're back.
Okay, great. So, we talked a little bit about me realizing that the top was the top, and the days, leading up to it were what made the success, made whatever it was. So when I realized that, I said to myself, I want to go into something that gives me a new challenge, that will give me new ups and downs until I get to whatever top I think I wanted for myself. So I knew it wasn't going to be on the internet, because I was burnt out, because I felt like I had learned all I wanted to learn. And so I said, okay, I need to do something that's a total 180. And of course, the internet, 180 is something tangible. And so I wanted to do a product. So I actually, so I stayed working at How He Asked, for the company that bought it for a couple years. It was part of the whole transition, and they wanted to keep me there for whatever reason. And so but I was long distance. I lived in St. Louis. That company's based in New York. And of course, I just have always had this big female entrepreneurship network. And so I was constantly just like trying to find ways to send love or little notes or bits of encouragement or gratitude to some of my coworkers. But I didn't want to spend $70 on flowers, and I thought a card was just boring, or maybe someone would expect like a gift card in it, and then I would look cheap if I didn't put a gift card in it. So so I just got in this habit myself of getting a chocolate bar and a card, because I was like, okay, that's enough. And I just got a little bubble, envelope, and threw it in and mailed it, and it looked like a little package, and it was great. So one day, and this happened to be like at the tail end of my time working at the Knot, at How He Asked in the Knot, I was standing in line and just like matched the two products up, and I was like, interesting, they're kind of like similar in size. Someone should just make this one product, and it would be the perfect, like, more than a gift, or more than a card, less than a gift. So then I was like, oh, I'll do it. And or at least I'll look into it. So I knew nothing about chocolate. I knew nothing about printing. I knew nothing about grocery stores or retail or wholesale or margins, nothing. So I was like, this is perfect. And
And at this point now, you're the opposite of Antifragile, right? You have a lot more to lose.
yeah.
Success, and a lot of people, after they've been a success, sometimes have a hard time starting from scratch again, because now it's this, oh my gosh, if I fail, it'll be such an embarrassing thing.
Yeah, definitely.
That, or did you just choose to ignore all of those?
Yeah, I don't know. I think about it because, how do I say it? I don't know if I'm afraid of failing. I don't know. I don't think I'm afraid of failing, because I don't look at failing like the same way, right? Like every new day is just a full day. And as long as you're doing something in that day that, brings you challenge or joy or happiness or even just a hug from someone else, like as long as there's something in it that feels good, then like you're just alive.
Right.
And so, having to add all those things up to like one final judgment day of like, was all that worth it or not, just is not, it's not how I focus myself. And so if this business goes wild, then fabulous. If it doesn't, okay, I still will have been doing the same things, to make up my existence.
Yeah. I
Uh,
like it.
so I guess I just don't, I mean, do I want another like lump sum? Great.
But you're not focusing on that and you're not letting that get in your way.
No,
And
no,
so for someone who has this idea for a business and has zero experience in every aspect of the business, which is what I'm hearing you say, how the heck do you get that information, or how do you learn that? How do you tackle all the things you had to tackle to get this business off the ground? And now it is a success.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. And actually, that's such a good point. I think a lot of people, thought, and even myself, I thought like, oh, I've done this before, I should know how to do it. But I one, didn't really want that. And two, I mean, I didn't. I knew some things, but we all don't know anything.
There's a lot we don't know.
There's a lot we don't know. And even now, I actually had a friend text me and say, hey, a friend of mine's proposal plans got derailed because of coronavirus. Do you have ideas? And I was like, I don't know anything about proposals. I ran and sold this proposal business for, 7 years, but, and it worked out. I had some ideas, but anyway,
so how did you figure this business out and get it off the ground from idea to execution?
Okay, so honestly, the first thing was just I Googled chocolate manufacturer because, well, if you need chocolate, you have to find someone to make it for you. So there happens to be a manufacturer here in St. Louis, which I never knew about. So I honestly just picked up the phone. So this was 2 hours after I got home from the grocery store. I had bought my friend's gift, mailed it, went home, and then Googled how to find a chocolate manufacturer. There was one in St. Louis. I called him, nicest guy in the world, told me to come in on Friday. So within a few days, I had someone who believed in the idea, said, sure. I mean, of course, I'm just buying his chocolate, so he's fine. But, he's got to take on some of the logistics. And so he loved the idea and was like, yeah. And he gave me a couple contacts of printers that he's used. And I had some designers from my creative world and the internet. So I just called on them to make some of the cards. And honestly, within a month, I had a prototype. And I started approaching different either retailers, boutiques, even sales groups who then would sell the product on my behalf, which is the structure that it is now. I don't do any selling myself, really. So yeah, it was honestly within a few months I could really test how is this product being received, at what price is it selling best at, and the investment wasn't too much in the beginning. I didn't buy hundreds of thousands of cards to start. I bought 5,000, and I thought I could sell the 5,000, and if I couldn't, then like I'll knock on my friends' doors and ask them to buy that. So I definitely still started with something that I felt was tangible for me personally to accomplish if I didn't get any other additional wins.
Sure.
So that was it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And now today you're in how many stores?
Oh, well, today not so many.
Yeah. Okay, let's back up. Corona.
Yeah, like a month ago. It fluctuates because it's like over the holidays we were in 2,500 stores.
That's awesome.
Those people will rebuy next holiday, but maybe don't want Easter. So now we're probably in 1,700 stores.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So, but it's a different business.
Yeah.
The margins are a lot different. They're very small compared to the internet world.
So you're still figuring out the business model and how to really leverage it, it sounds like.
Yeah. I'm still trying to, I'm still trying to figure out like what I call my sweet spot. So it turned out with how he asked that my sweet spot revenue was driven by jewelers. So what happened was a lot of men ended up coming to the site to look for advice or to copy other people's proposals on their phone. So we actually had this big chunk of traffic coming from men who were about to buy, I think the average ring is $6,000. And so all the jewelers, Tiffany's, Blue Nile, James Allen, they all wanted to be in front of that guy. And they had great big budgets to do that because it was a high price item. So my sweet spot advertiser partner was a jeweler. And so once I discovered that in the business, it was just all uphill. So I'm still trying to figure out what my sweet spot is here. Is it grocery stores like Schnucks? Is it boutiques, just fashion boutiques, gift boutiques? Is it department stores? And so we're about 18 months in, and it's still a bunch of trial and error. And so I do not have the sweet spot yet. I'm not quite sure, but we're just still trying to fire on all cylinders and see what comes up.
What happens. Yeah. And that sort of leads me to the last part of the interview as our inspiration hour is starting to wrap up. One of the reasons I wanted to do this is, it is a challenging time for so many entrepreneurs, for so many small business owners, for people in general. Let's just not kid ourselves. And it's easy to focus on the doom and gloom, and not that the doom and gloom isn't relevant, and not that we want to just slough that off. But I think it's important to hear these stories too, right? But I don't want to completely not talk about the coronavirus. So I'm curious, how are you coping with this big change, and what is it looking like for you, and how are you keep going and staying sane, or are you staying sane? And have you ramped up your talking in the mirror?
I've talked. I mean, I'm basically in a basement right now. My husband and I were traveling for 1 year. And so we put all of our stuff in storage, left our condo. And so we have nothing right now. I thought we'd come back and buy a new house and unpack, and we have nothing. So I am talking to myself a lot in this basement. Yes. Yeah, so, it's not summertime yet, but chocolate always takes a bit of a downturn in summer because it's just tougher to ship. And so a lot of our business anyways is done from September to March and April. So I was already expecting a downturn. So as far as structure of the business, making sure that my inventory was exactly where it needed to be and not, I hadn't over ordered or anything, that I'd already been prepared for. So in that sense, I'm lucky. In the other sense, we've had 0 orders. I mean, online orders, yes, but from our big clients, because grocery stores are ordering only essential items, which I completely understand. And of course, boutiques now are just, a lot of cities, they're not allowed to be open. So in that sense, it's put a halt entirely on the business. And it hit me quite hard just thinking, I still don't know what it means for my business, but truly what it meant for my time was that I had nothing to do. And
you're in a basement in an Airbnb, and you just got back from a year-long trip around the world.
And I really was already preparing myself to not have heavy challenges of work, but I did not prepare to mentally have nothing. And so I did spend a good few days wallowing. Mm-hmm. And then what I realized was half of being a business owner is being able to connect with other business owners and to understand what customers want, to understand what other businesses are working on and doing. And I would do that on a daily basis when things were going great. And I stopped thinking I had nothing to do, but I still have that to do. So I have, sort of kicked myself and said, all right, you are going to set up a phone call with someone every single day to discuss how they're feeling. Maybe I could lend a hand since I had all this preparation for the downturn in summer anyways. I don't have a lot to do or not do. How can I engage with people and help? And I'm helping them, or I want to help them, but also it's so that I stay focused and engaged myself. So I think that we have this opportunity to have a symbiotic relationship and circle of advice with people. I happen to tend leaning more towards women as mentors and mentees. So I've had a lot of just gossipy girly talks, but so I think in this time, one of the biggest opportunities we have is just the rawness to connect with people, and the time that we have to say to ourselves, like, what was working, what isn't, who's important to me. You know, one of the things as an entrepreneur that I think, um, I, I I think most people think that entrepreneurs want to work 24/7. And I actually think the opposite. They want to work hard and smart so they don't have to work 24/7. At least in my case.
I'm a little bit of a workaholic, so I'm thinking that's what I'm working to become, work smarter, not harder, but I'm not there yet, Stacy, but I'm working on it.
Okay, well, then I'll just speak for myself. That is a goal of mine. That is, when you ask what has made you successful, I think creating lean programs and having all of the things that I put my time to be, profit driving and not too much fat anywhere, yada yada. So I just think right now we're all being handed this reevaluation, forced reevaluation, where we have to say, okay, what are the things that are driving the most value to my business? What are the things that I'm feeling most enthused to do, even in a time like this? Because that's a huge indicator of where, you derive your, personal momentum from, is what gets you out of bed and excited, even in times like this. So, I just would urge people to be taking a look at, just run through your spreadsheets, cut the fat, reach out to customers, ask them how they're doing, see if they have any other feedback on your product or what the future holds, and just learn from everyone right now. Learn from their struggles, learn from, what they're, everyone's going to be forced to be creative right now. So be in the conversation versus waiting for it all to shake out. Does that make sense?
I think that makes a lot of sense. But what I appreciate the most is before you shared all of that, the first thing you said is, I gave myself permission to wallow for a few days.
Oh yeah. And I do every other hour too, like it's not going to be an ongoing rush that you're giving yourself. But I just think, I'm a big list maker. So, we all have a lot in our head, and putting it on paper helps me then turn it into getting the task done. And so I personally just came up with a list of like, okay, what do I need to do? I would like to clean up my master retailer list. I want to know who's carrying us right now and how's it going. And, I can spend all this manual time at this point doing that, where before, I was so busy I couldn't. So, what are some other things here? I wrote some things down here.
I gave her a little bit of a heads up. Oh, and quick comment. Let's see. Real quick, Jessica Rask, who I love, she loves math, which makes me love her that much more. She said, during this time, everyone should read Profit First. It will help you all cut the fat, as well as prepare for anything like this to happen. I have heard great things about the book, Profit First. And for anyone interested, Jessica Rask is happy to discuss how to implement it. So Jessica, be careful what you say, because I'm going to send people your way. So thank you for that.
Well, I was also going to say one thing that I feel passionate about, Stacy, as you know, is that I'm always happy to help people think through their businesses and be more efficient. And a lot of times we don't even see that we're spending the majority of our time on something that's not moving the needle. And I think somewhere in the back of our minds, we know that, but it takes someone to just push them. And so I truly do. I volunteer to help anyone who needs, a 20-minute kick in the ass. Or
and she's good at it because she's done it to me, personally and professionally.
Thanks for saying that. But yeah, so I even thought like, okay, I'll do a competitive analysis. I've been so focused on my business the past 18 months. Like I forgot to look at what Hershey's is doing and what this person's doing. So now like you have some time to just really, fine tune yourself in the industry. And there's plenty of things that I know you think that you wish you knew more of or could do better. And so I just think now's the time. And the inevitable is that we're all going to be low. I don't know if we're going to be pulling ourselves back up. So instead of thinking about that, think about how can I level out things that I deemed like not important, even though I knew they were important previously.
No, I love that. And so I just want to say thank you. We have 5 minutes left. I had this crazy idea on Tuesday, and here we are on Thursday.
Which I appreciate, because that's what I said. Don't think, just do.
Exactly. And while I'm not quite where you are yet in terms of just tackling things, every time I do take your advice, I feel so much better. And
Great.
I knew even if this was a huge failure, having this hour with you, I would leave energized and inspired and ready to get back and conquer the world. And I think we all need a little bit of that right now. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, of course, I'm happy to. And as always, you definitely are moving forward and kicking ass. And none of us here started a chat like this. You did it. And, you have to go home and say, I did something great for however many people are here. And I learned and I tried something new. And all of those things make your day. Like I feel like this is like a theme of my purpose today with you, is just, it's not about how it looks or what it contributes to in the end. It's about each and every day. And like when I was traveling with my husband for a year, we were all over the world. And I constantly had to think, what is the purpose of this? If I'm constantly seeing temple after church after waterfall, same waterfall, new waterfall, looks the same waterfall, like what is it? And so what I realized is that as long as there was something in every day that I just felt like that day, that moment, that was special. I might forget it, but in the moment, in that day, it was special. And so I don't think that we have to have this big to-do list or this big set of goals. I think we just need to say, did I do something today that I feel good about? And so you did. You started something new. Talk to your other favorite Stacy. I had the same, like it's enough. It's always enough.
Well, I just love and adore you and appreciate you. And shameless plug is that if you guys enjoyed this interview, pretty soon we'll be launching our media platform with beautiful videos made by Tree9. Thank you, Ria, who's still on this call. And thank you to everyone who is listening to this hour. And I hope that you enjoyed it. And I can't wait to get to catch up with you again and hear how you are, Stacy. So it was great talking to you.
Thank you, as always, for having me. I'm very proud of you. And I look forward to the next time we can talk.
Absolutely.
All right, Stace.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye.